Hi, everyone. On this week's podcast, David Maurici, the author of Sour Candy and Chaos, My Life with the Party Monster. Now, the party monster in question is Michael Alig. He was king of the club kids in the 80s. But he and Robert Freeze Riggs murdered on March the 17th, 1996, Andre Melendez and dismembered his body. Michael went to prison for 17 years, and when he came out, he moved in with his best friend, Ernie Glam, who is the husband of David Maurici. And this is David Maurici's story of the time they spent with Michael Alig.
He could make you do anything and make you think it's your idea. He knew who his audience was and who he could use to get things from. I think he thought that we owed him something, that the public owed him something. He was delusional in the fact that he thought that everybody was going to come out and embrace him. Well, we were trying to get Michael to show remorse. He just thought that he was going to come out of prison and he was going to be the same Michael that he was before he went into prison. He didn't have any remorse, really. He didn't want to face the new reality of his life.
Now, don't go away. Just time for me to ask you to subscribe. And of course, if you subscribe, it helps me, and it also allows you to find out when I posted something new on the channel. Okay, let's get on with David Maurici. So first of all, David Maurici, welcome. You're the author of Sour Candy and Chaos, My Life with the Party Monster. Obviously, I've got to give a bit of a background to start with for people who don't know who the party monster is. So could you tell me who Michael Alig was?
Well, Michael Alig was the king of the club kids in the 80s and the 90s. And then he had a drug issue with one of his friends, and it went awry, and it led to a manslaughter where he chopped up the body and he put it in the Hudson River and went to prison for 17 years. So my husband, Ernie, is also a former club kid, and he was really good friends with Michael, and they lived together in the past. And my husband felt that he wanted to give Michael a second chance and have him move in with us. And I never met Michael. I never seen Michael. Like, the only thing that I knew about Michael was from watching the movie The Party Monster. So I really didn't think Michael was going to come to live with us. I thought it was going to, like, some sick joke that, like, some manslaughterist was going to come and live with us. As my book starts in the beginning, like, the door opens and James St. James and Michael are like having a big kiki. They're like laughing and having a big celebration. And then I was in the other room and I was like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? So my book is basically about living with Michael for 15 months and trying to help him to become a productive member of society. And in the interim, he like basically did all these horrible things to us.
Well, let's get to that because, as you say, there's Michael Alig, who was famous during the 80s because of the club kids, who were sort of this anti-Warhol-esque group of people who were it was a very interesting and fascinating era in New York at that time. And the club kids era ended really because of this brutal murder of Andre Melendez. And
right.
Michael had dismembered his body. Now, you say, as you said, there you are. He was friends with your husband, Ernie Glam, and you both wanted to give him a second chance. Why did you think that this could possibly work?
Well, I don't know. I didn't think it was going to work or not work because I had the mindset up until the minute he walked into the door that this was like some sick joke, like I said. And I don't know, because I think I see the good in people. And like Michael did have some redeeming qualities to him. Like when we were in the apartment together, because he was under parole, so he had to he had a curfew, and for like the first couple of months, Michael abided by his curfew, and we formed a bond with each other. Like we found that we had similar qualities in certain things. Like we liked watching TV shows, we liked doing certain things together. And I felt like after like knowing him for like a short period of time that like I could help him. The thing is, like, I think at that point in my life, like I needed to help myself, and I try to avoid helping myself. So I took on like a pet project, and Michael was the pet project.
Tell me a bit about his personality, because he'd been in prison 17 years. How had that affected him, do you think, in terms of his daily routine?
Well, I'll have to say, like, not only was he in prison for 17 years, but 5 of them were in solitary confinement. So it affected his everyday life because now he had to follow a structure. In prison, I don't know, like I've never been to prison, nor do I want to ever go to prison, but like I don't know what the structure like life was in prison, because he had to wake up at a certain time to go to parole, and he would stay up till all hours of the night. So I would wake him up every morning and make sure he got to parole on time. And then after he did his parole, he had no ambition to do anything else except for in the first couple of the first month or so that he was out of prison. World of Wonder followed him around with cameras because they wanted to film a sequel to the Party Monster movie. And I'm only assuming that they wanted to get a redemption story out of Michael, because when he was in prison, he painted hundreds of paintings. He wrote a book. So Michael was a brilliant person. Like he could have been very successful when he came out of prison. And Ernie and I tried very hard to help him. We even made an online store, and we sold merchandise that made a lot of money for him. That who knows where that money went to. We tried as much as we could to help him, and I think like I didn't realize until the end that like if somebody's trying to help you, you have to want the help. And I don't think he wanted the help because I don't think he felt really worthy for the help, or he had all these mental issues that he was dealing with and didn't want to face them.
I mean, he got certain opportunities afforded him, like Gay Times, for instance, in Britain, that wanted to write a weekly article, things that came up, which would have been for 2 factors, for the club kids and for his notoriety because of the killing. But he seemed to be someone who would ruin everything that came his way. What do you think? What was in him that would ruin everything?
I think it was self-sabotage, because self-sabotage me, and maybe he like just didn't like, because Michael lived in the past. He came out of prison after 17 years, and it was like, I almost like say it's like an Austin Powers movie in a way, because like he just thought that he was going to come out of prison and he was going to be the same Michael that he was before he went into prison. Everything that he did had to be of grandeur, and if it wasn't, he was upset with himself, or he would go into a drug bender. But he was very resourceful, like in ways that could have been beneficial to him, but he used his resources to find drug dealers, to find people to have sex with, to like do all these things. And he thought it was beneath him to get like a job working at like a fast food restaurant or a clothing store or anything, because he's, oh, I'm Michael Alig. I can't, it would look bad if I would doing a menial job. And meanwhile, I was doing a menial job. You have to like want something. And like, I wanted it for him because like when we would have like our alone time and we would he would be the Michael Alig that you fell in love with. But then when there was a crowd of people around, it would be like a whole different Michael Alig, where he'd be like on and he would be like the actor Michael Alig, where like people like me didn't mean anything to him because I was not important. So I was only important when he needed me to be important.
Was he deluded, do you think? Because in a certain way, I mean, this was an incredibly brutal murder, but somehow he believed he could walk back into society and resurrect his name from an earlier period. So do you think he was deluded in that?
I think he was delusional. He was delusional in the fact that he thought that everybody was going to come out and embrace him, and that he was just gonna and the people are gonna say, "Oh, we want you to host these parties. We want you to like come back to nightlife," because at that point, like the nightlife in New York City was not the same as it was back then, and he thought that maybe he could resurrect the scene, and all of his like his thoughts were like, this is what we did in the 90s, this is what we did then. It's like this is like 2014. It's like what worked in the 90s may not work in 2014. He like, I think he just he didn't want to face the new reality of his life.
He had fans still, which was quite strange to read about, the people that he was able to use, but in a sense he wasn't able to use because they couldn't really do a lot.
Right. Here's the thing is like when, because Michael was from the Midwest, and the thing is when he came to New York because he wanted this big fabulous life, and those people who were his fans are also from the Midwest, and they basically like, so oh, this is somebody who is from the same place that I came from, and this is like they made something of themselves, kind of. So like they idolized him, and when you idolize somebody, and he knew that they idolized him, so like basically he knew who his audience was and who he could use to get things from. My opinion is like, if you're so good at getting people to like give you money, give you food, give you whatever you need, like you should be good at finding a job that's going to like support you and give you purpose.
Did he talk about prison and what it was like?
A little bit. Michael had a boyfriend when he was in prison, and every like I think several times a week we would call him on the phone and we would speak to him. And Michael would tell us stories about being in prison, that it almost seemed like some of it was like Alice in Wonderland kind of stories, like, oh, we would be sitting in our jail cell drinking tea, and we would make Oreo cookie like sundaes, like whatever. Like he made it seem like it was like fun for him in a way, but then he made it seem like being like the solitary confinement part was not fun, because I think that probably broke him to a point. But he just kept getting himself put into solitary confinement because he was like doing all these horrible things,
Such as?
like he was doing drugs, he was like acting out, he would do anything. He would like drink like cleaning fluids, like, so anything that he could possibly do to get attention, I guess. And like I don't know why I think it's probably like, I hate to say, his mom was like that too. So his mom basically like created a monster.
I mean, you do mention in the book when he goes back to his mother and he wants to retrieve the stuff that he'd put away for 17 years. Can you tell me what happened when he went back?
I can only tell you based on what he told me, because he would be calling me in a panic, and he would be crying out on the phone. Like he said, he went into his to use his mom's bathroom, and he dropped something on the floor, and the mom came in and she was screaming at him, and they had similar personalities. So I think when you have similar personalities with somebody, you clash. And his mom, he would always tell me that his mom like basically shamed him growing up. And the only reason, like the main reason, I shouldn't say the only reason, the main reason he went back to visit his mom was so that he could retrieve everything from the storage, because his friend, God bless her, for 17 years she paid for the storage for him to have the storage unit. And then when he emptied the storage unit and he had so much, like he had the whole nightlife of the 90s in his storage unit. When he brought those things home, it was like amazing. It was like orgasmic.
So
Like,
tell me what was in that, because I know he had press cuttings, he
oh,
had
he had everything. And I'll tell you, like, when he closed the storage, his mom was so mad that he closed the storage, because she told him she had no place to store her Christmas decorations. But what was in those boxes? When we opened those boxes, there was Club Kid cards. So in the 90s, the Club Kids had like trading cards that had their name on it, and then and a picture of them, and on the back was their stats, like, hi, I'm like Michael Alig and blah blah blah, like. And then he had like all like invites from all the parties that they threw, and Michael saved everything. So it wouldn't be like one of each invite, it would be like 100. And some of the invites were very clever. Some of them were like like a 5x7 puzzle of for a party interview. It'd be like a little jar of honey that they would have a party called Honey Trap. It would be like so many different things. And Michael also was a big collector of Lego. So he had like so many Lego sets. And I think that was one of his passions, because in the apartment that he lived with Ernie, he had one room just full of Lego. And he would get really upset if you called it Legos versus Lego. He said it's Lego, not Legos.
I mean, you
So
mentioned, sorry, I just want to say, you mentioned in the book that he also was a manipulator, that he would also try and cause problems between you and Ernie. Can you tell me about what he would do?
we'll say I would tell Michael something, and then he would go and he would turn it around to make it look like I was like a bad person. Like I'll give you an example. I told him like what, like I think it had to be over 20 something years ago, before I even met Ernie, that I had an intimate relation with somebody in the backseat of a car. And he told Ernie that, oh, David is having sex with guys in the backseat of your car.
So everyone, just time again to ask you to subscribe. It helps me. It allows you to find out when I've posted something new on the channel. And I would like to say we should not forget the memory of Andre Angel Melendez, who was murdered and dismembered by Michael Alig and Robert Freeze Riggs.
I think he tried to like get Ernie to like break up with me so that him and Ernie could live together in the apartment. Maybe like I assumed for like a little while that he might have had a crush on Ernie, and he wanted me out of the picture.
I mean, what's interesting is you mentioned about when he went to South Bend that you only know his side of the story. He's manipulating and obviously telling lies. Did you come to the point where you thought about what had happened and this murder and his side of the story about what the truth really was in his life? Was there any truth at all?
Well, like if you ever watched The Pew, which was Michael and Ernie's YouTube show, like, and I referenced it in my book, there is like there's a whole like section of The Pew where Michael tries to say everything that James wrote in the book was a lie. And you know what? Maybe some of it was fictional for the audience, but like you can't fictionalize chopping somebody's body up and putting it in the Hudson River. Like you really can't. And there was also a part in of The Pew where Michael was we were trying to get Michael to show remorse for it, and he didn't have any remorse really, because he would make jokes about Angel. He would tell people, "Oh, I clipped Angel's wings," and I don't even know if it was for shock value or if he really meant it. He was so worried about his reputation of being Michael Alig from the 90s that he didn't really show that much vulnerability. Like after the first 3 months, like his vulnerability went out of the window. Like trying to use a cell phone on the street and crying, that was like, I felt really bad about that. And like things like that, like made me want to help him. But when I come home and he's smoking crack at the kitchen table naked, like then I'm like, oh, okay, that's a whole nother story.
I mean, you mentioned the YouTube podcast and the episode 151 I watched this morning, which is Michael Alig rips disco bloodbath to shreds. It is
Right.
it's very uncomfortable to watch because of how he talks about Angel, which you mentioned, and also how he always seemed to blame other factors in what he did and never take any form of responsibility.
That's a big thing, because I like part of the 15 months of Michael living with us was me being Michael's scapegoat for everything that, like, if something would go wrong, if he was late for something, like one time he was 2 hours late for the Pew, and he blamed it on me. He said I stole his keys and he couldn't get home. He had to stay at somebody else's house overnight. So anything that he could possibly do, because I was an easy target, because I would always forgive him. Like, or maybe not forgive him, but I was always like, let it go. Because he'd be like cursing me out. And then 5 minutes later, he'd be like, let's watch Dark Shadows. And I'd be like, okay, no problem. Some of his vulnerability when we were alone was what attracted me to him. Like, I loved him as a person and I hated him as a person too. So, and that was, I think, the thing that a lot of people got from him, that because he could make you do anything and make you think it's your idea.
It does sound to me in many ways that you're not a person who likes confrontation, because there's not an aspect in the book where you really confront him, where, you know, I feel like I want this explosion to come out of you in some way.
To be totally honest, Michael and I had drag out fights with each other, and like there's only so much that you can write in a book that at some point you're going to lose people's attention. So we did have drag out fights with each other, and when Michael when Michael was gonna leave our apartment, because at some point we basically, Ernie wanted to kick him out like 3 months before, but I said to Ernie, no, we can't kick him out, because as much as he was horrible to me, I said no, because I didn't want him to be homeless. And I told Michael, I said to him, I said, I'm really sorry that I enabled you. I apologized to him for 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 doing for trying to help him. And he never apologized or thanked me for helping him. And I said, if I didn't enable you, then maybe things would have been different. Like, I woke you up in the morning to get ready for parole. I saved you from having to like, basically I saved you from going back to prison. Like, I risked my life for your life. And like, it's I think he thought that we owed him something, that the public owed him something.
You know how some people, when they're really good manipulators, they find the right people who they know how that they can manipulate and use. Do you think, in a sense, he already knew that about Ernie and he already guessed it about you because he hadn't met you before?
Yeah, I think so. I think Michael was very good at like figuring out who he could use, and he he was very good at using me for things. Like, he would ask me to do something and I would do it. And since I take pride in what I do, like, I would do it to the best of my ability. And sometimes he would be upset because, like, it it was better than what he had imagined it would be. And then people would be acknowledging my work, because, like, I would do the social media for the Pew and people would love me. People would like contact me and they would try to like befriend me. And I think Michael was upset with that. And he always like try to give pushback to me and try to make it seem like what I did was like not worthy enough. Because if he thought that my work was worthy enough when I was doing the social media for the Pew, he wouldn't have tried to hire a social media coordinator. He wouldn't have tried to hire a social media team when I was doing everything, and it was getting like a lot of likes and a lot of people were subscribing. So he didn't like when other people were successful. That's why he made fun of RuPaul and Susanne Bartsch and all those people, because they were able to like, and RuPaul made himself very famous, and Susanne Bartsch is famous as well, and she's still throwing parties in New York City. And Michael was very jealous of that, so he would put them down.
How did you eventually get him to leave?
Well, the final straw was like, I told Michael two things. I said, don't, like, these are the two things that make or break. I said, don't lie to me and don't burn down my apartment. Because we would come home sometimes and there would be like, the stove would be on, he would be passed out on the floor. So the final straw was like when he almost burned down my apartment. Like, his bed sheets were like full of burn holes and everything. And after like 3 months of Ernie saying we need to kick him out, I said, "Oh, you're right. We need to kick him out." And he didn't want to leave. As much as he would tell people he hated living with us, he would say, "Oh, living with David and Ernie is terrible, blah blah blah." And David's so nasty to me. David's this to me. Like, he would, like, basically, I felt like I was being gaslighted by him.
I mean, he was one of those people that obviously was going to die early. You must have thought, okay, we're going to hear about his death at some point. So when you did hear about his death, what was your reaction?
I could tell you exactly when I heard about Michael's death. It was on Christmas. I think it was Christmas Day, actually. I was riding the treadmill in my apartment, getting ready to go like celebrate Christmas with my family, and Ernie had said that Michael like passed away, and I felt no emotion at the time because of all the like, we didn't end on good terms, Michael and I am a big proponent of closure. And I tried to, before Michael like died, I tried to like have some closure with him and say like, look, like, I lived with you for 15 months. I helped you, and we need to like, you don't have to be my best friend. You don't even have to be my friend. at least like if we see each other somewhere, we could be cordial to each other. And he wouldn't entertain having a conversation with me. And I was telling people, I said, maybe if he did entertain that, then I wouldn't have had a book, because the main reason I wrote my book was not to publish it and make all this money. It was to like help me deal with my therapy. For all this time, like I've been holding it inside and having like all these like mixed emotions and letting them out now, and rereading my books and like, what the hell did I do? Why did I like let this happen to me? Why did I let somebody why was I somebody's punching bag? And you know why? Because I didn't feel worthy of myself at that point. And I didn't feel and I had Ernie, of course, but Ernie's very self-sufficient person. He didn't need anybody to help him really. He and and I felt like helping Michael was a distraction from helping myself.
I mean, what's fascinating, I think, about your book is that, in a sense, it gives a different view, a sort of a bit of the banality of Michael Alig.
Right. Like nothing in that book glamorized Michael, nor did it glamorize me, because I was like very worried when I wrote that, when I finished writing that book, that like that my parents were gonna read that book and they were gonna like go into an early grave, because they're seeing me doing all these drugs and doing everything. And I tried to put as much of that in my book as possible to make it seem like you know what, I have my own faults too, and I like did all these things too, and like granted, like if Michael didn't live with us, I probably wouldn't have done it, but nobody really forced those drugs out up my nose or in my mouth. Although there were times when Michael like would like, here's a spoon, do it, like, but I went along with it as a willing participant. I didn't feel like I was being like forced into doing any of those things. It was just like I guess because I was fascinated in a way with him and the club kids, because I didn't like I was with Ernie. This will be our 20-year anniversary. And when I met him, I didn't even know anything about the club kids until like months later. He brought out a bit like an archive of Alexis DiBiase's photos. And then I saw Ernie as a club kid. And I said to myself, oh, if I would have met Ernie in the 90s, would I have like gone out with him in the 90s? Like, because he was so like, they had all these crazy looks that wasn't my personality. But I think what happened is when Michael moved in with us, and they started to like reminisce about the club kids, I was fascinated about it. And maybe I wanted to be a part of that in a way. So like, even though Michael wasn't a club kid anymore, or maybe they'll say once you're a club kid, you're a club kid for life. I don't know. But I just felt like, oh, a little part of me is like a club kid, because like Michael gave me a name and everything, even though I didn't like it, but he called me Igor. So it's like, then you feel like you're part of the group. And so when you're part of the group, you're willing to do anything to stay in the group.
Andre Angel Melendez has never really had a voice because he was murdered in 1996 and Michael lived 24 years longer. For you, was that also difficult, because you know that this happened and Angel had been murdered, and it's, when everyone talks about Michael Alig, it's almost as a side issue, the Angel guy, and it's a bit sad really in a way that this person has not been looked at himself.
I could say I didn't know Angel, and Ernie was good. Ernie was friends with Angel, so Ernie had like told me all about Angel. They used to date each other, and like I felt like that if Michael would have had some more remorse, like it would have been, it would have made the situation of like a processing Angel's death like better, because I don't think Michael ever processed it. I just thought it was very shocking. I thought it was very shocking, and like anytime it was brought up, it was more shocking because it wasn't brought up with humility or remorse. It was brought up with like a joke. That was very uncomfortable for me because because they lost him, and he didn't even like try to like say I'm sorry to them or try to say I'm sorry to anybody, at least when he lived with us. I don't know if he was putting on appearances or whatever, but I didn't see Michael ever have a remorse. And by him not having a remorse, put a bad taste in my mouth. Somebody who committed such a crime like that shouldn't have came out of prison with fanfare and cameras. They should have came out of prison quietly and tried to be and try to assimilate into society like a normal person, and not try to relive your celebrity the minute you come out of prison. Because to me, having a big party after you came out of prison, and that's why I called my first chapter Cinco de Mayo, because that's the term that they coined it. Like, and it shouldn't have been a party like him coming out of prison, because it disrespects Angel and it disrespects his family.
You said that writing this book, in a sense, was cathartic. It was a way of getting all these issues out and processing what have happened. If you look back and say that Michael Alig was to turn up today at your flat, what would you do?
That's a very easy question, because I said after I reread my book again, I said there were so many things in that book that I would have done differently, and I would have kicked him out sooner. I don't. Maybe I would have let him come into our. Maybe I would have let him come and stay with us. But once he started doing drugs and bringing like anonymous people into our house, I would come home from work and there would be like guys in his room, and I would be afraid for me. Like, so then I would have been like, I would have changed the locks and I would have like threw all his stuff on the street after 6 months, because after 6 months is when he was like a terror on wheels. Like he was starting to get there. The first like after 3 months he was slowly graduating, but after 6 months it was like hell on wheels. So yeah, I would have kicked him out much sooner.
I mean, as I said, I just want to thank you, David Maurici, for this book, because Sour Candy and Chaos, My Life with the Party Monster, because it gives such another perspective of Michael Alig. Now, there's been books about him. There's been the film Party Monster. He's been in documentaries. There's been so much stuff about him. Do you think now that, in a sense, he should be forgotten, that people could remember the club kids, but they can forget Michael Alig? It should be now put aside?
No, I think, you see, I think that you can't say the club kids without saying Michael Alig. You can't. Like, that's like not in people's vernaculars, because a lot of the club kids like that I'm friendly with thank Michael, because Michael gave them a job. Michael helped them. Like, so that's why people still have an affection for him, because he did help people and gave people an opportunity to express themselves. And like that, like, and he was very creative, and all of those parties that he threw, they can never be reduplicated. Like, that's like a piece of New York history that will go on for years and years and years. People, that's like, that happened in the 80s and the 90s, and people are still talking about that. So, like, that people will talk about that like 20 or 30 years from now, and the name Michael Alig, just like Andy Warhol, the name will never leave your vernacular. that's his legacy. Like, people were so upset with me, like, oh, you published your book on Michael's birthday and blah, blah, blah. Like, I published my book on Michael's birthday because I knew people were going to talk about it. And Michael loved when people talked about him. So that was my gift to him for his birthday, to say, like, look, like, my book is not meant to like slander you. My book didn't, like, it was meant to like tell my truth. And I didn't say really that many negative things about him in my book. I said the truth because I lived with him and I saw he could have been a brilliant, successful person when he came out of prison, and he could have had his redemption story. But like it says in my book, he was never destined to have a redemption story. Like, people knew from day one that he was never going to have a redemption story. Once he started doing drugs, people knew that he was going to die. It was just a matter of time.
I just want to thank you again, because I did find the book fascinating. Sour Candy and Chaos, My Life with the Party Monster. David Maurici, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad you enjoyed my book.
Up there is an interview I recommend. Down there is where you can find all the podcast interviews. And here is where you can connect.